folks. Alex Gertsburg here. Thanks for joining me. We're going to have a really great discussion here. This is going to be a conversation about working from home and securing your environment in these times of strangeness and surrealness or surreality, I guess. So I'm Alex Gertsburg. I'm the CEO of the Gertsburg Law Firm and Cover My Six LLC. We are a full service business law firm we've got offices in Cleveland and Sugar Falls. We've got 12 attorneys and staff, and we are a full service business law firm primarily for small and mid-size businesses. The other person you're going to hear from today is Ed Cordiano. Ed has a great company called CMIT Solutions. CMIT helps businesses by proactively managing their IT infrastructure and offering enterprise class solutions at prices that small and mid-sized businesses, just like my clients, can afford. They focus on keeping confidential business data protected while maintaining an efficient, reliable, and secure network. So Ed would have been here with his better half, Mary Ann, but she is currently wearing a whole lot of other hats, and Ed is going to steal the show. But Ed and Mary Ann are proud to be local owners while having an extensive national reach. The CMIT Solutions franchise, which started 23 years ago, has more than 200 offices around the country. They combine personalized local service with the technical resources of a national firm with over 800 technicians. Ed's from Northeast Ohio, attended Lake Catholic, received his engineering degree from Case, worked in technical sales for a number of years in Cleveland and Chicago, while also receiving his MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. So I'm going to turn it over to Ed in about 30 seconds. And the way I thought I would just toss it to you, Ed, before I did, was to tee this conversation up with something that actually happened to me. Well, not to me, but to the board member who was sitting next to me. So I was at a board meeting. I'm on the board of Cozy, and I'm there, and the fella sitting next to me is a CEO of a cybersecurity company, and he is, you would have to have the building catch fire typically for him to leave our board meeting. He is always phones off, emails off, fully engaged, paying attention, and this happened 3 weeks ago. He rushes out, says, "I'll be right back." I guess he had the 911 message come up on his text. Yep. He came back at the end of the board meeting. He was out for 45 minutes at that point. He said, "My client has been ransomwared, and they want $5 million in Bitcoin to release all of their clients' medical information. And if they don't get it within the next 24 hours, they will release it, but they're going to release it on the internet." And this is a major healthcare provider in Cleveland and all over the country, and it was going to cripple them entirely. And what I learned over the next couple of days is that it was basically a back channel hack into the system. And they ended up negotiating this deal with Bitcoin, and that got me to thinking that it could happen to the best companies out there, and it's happening right now. So I couldn't wait to hear what you have to say about ransomware, Ed, because I imagine you got some experience with it yourself. But with that, we're law firms. Just like that medical services company, I mean, our clients' information, if it ends up on the internet, we're closing our doors. Right. So talk about that, and then tell us about what else we as lawyers and law firms can do to secure our environments.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. And good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your Friday afternoon, pretty close to cocktail hour here. I'm going to start sharing my screen with you so you can start to see what's going on here. Yeah, it's a good, it's a good entry, Alex, into probably why the people that are on this call are on it today. So, ransomware, malware attacks, these things are top of mind. These are kind of, as we like to say, I mean, we don't sleep at night so our clients can. I mean, these are the things that we worry about. We'll worry about your IT so that you don't have to. But certainly when you talk about malware, and a piece of malware is ransomware. You take a look at the statistics in 2019, and I mean, it was prevalent and it's growing. And now we face a secondary challenge to that whole field. Before, when you take a look at it, we were, in an office environment. In an office environment, you've got firewalls, you've got all these other things that are supposedly there to protect you. Now we're kind of taking the same environment where you've got the hackers that are out there that want the information, and we've spread our workforce out and they're remote. So the question is, how can we still have the same level of diligence and security around your information and really more, and your client's information while being remote? So we'll be talking, about some of the things you can do to protect yourself, your clients, your firms, your customers, some sound advice you can give to your clients along the way. And as you mentioned, this will kind of be a little bit interactive. So, if anybody does along the way have any questions, reach out. You should have a little button on your screen where you can reach out and send questions, along the way. So, as Alex mentioned, we're the ones doing the presentation today, and we appreciate the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association allowing us this opportunity to do that. We'll keep it pretty light, just a few slides here, and then it's really about any questions that I might be able to answer. But really, the goal, or one of the things I want to try to accomplish today, I give cybersecurity presentations, all over the place, and you can go in so many different ways about it. You could talk cybersecurity for hours, and you could talk cybersecurity for days. What we really wanted to try to focus on in today's webinar was taking your business and, like I said, maybe even offering some sound advice to some of your clients if they were to kind of come to you and ask you some questions. And how do you create a secure environment, things you can do as a firm, things you can do as a business to keep your assets, your information safe and secure. So, we're going to kind of talk about this security in a home office environment. And one of the things that I don't want to stress, but be aware, be diligent in the fact there are two different environments that we find ourselves in today as we take our business and we go remote. Some people are literally using their personal computers to then do their business. That needs to be handled in a completely separate manner than if you're using a company-owned laptop. Actually, I have some clients where they're sending so many people home, they don't have the number of laptops to go home. So literally they're telling their employees to pick up their PCs and their monitors and reassemble them back at home and use that. And then we're helping them along the way. What are some of the threat vectors that you need to be aware about? Once again, this is a 1-hour webinar. Just the high-level vectors that you need to be concerned about and things you can do, and then things you personally can do to protect yourself and your company. Now, fundamentally, what are we talking about? We always talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework whenever we go into any one of our clients. And what does that mean? It means we identify where are the risks, where are the threat vectors, where are the vulnerabilities in our clients' networks from an infrastructure perspective. Now you take that same piece, and then, you know, we're going to try to protect them, whether that's with a firewall, whether that's with antivirus, whether that's with our SOC, our Security Operations Center. We have all these mechanisms, products and services that we utilize to provide the best service to our clients. We detect any risks, any threats that enter into the system. How do we respond to those threats that come into your system? I.e., you know, Alex, when you were saying your board member had to leave the room, obviously there was a detection, there was a response, and now you've got to recover. So we cover all of these pieces with our clients, and now we're taking a look, and we have to come all the way back to the beginning with our clients. We have to identify what are the risks now associated with our companies, with our clients' networks, because now everybody's remote and they're dealing with their home security systems. So some very fundamental, most of you have probably already made this transition to the home environment. So if you have, this slide is a little, you know, maybe 2-3 days, 1 week, a week and a half late in its delivery, but nonetheless, I wanted to keep it in the slide deck. And that is, you know, how can you bring your PC, if you're told by your company, in your firm, how do you bring your system home? You know, simple things, but in the haste of business today, and everybody's just a little shocked on what's going on, you know, it's important. Take a photo. As silly as it sounds, you look on the back, you go, just a couple cords, I'll remember when I get home. You never do. You always miss one. You're always misplacing something. Did it go here, here? Just take a picture, bring power strips, and make sure you do have your systems connected to power strips. You know, and then obviously in today's environment where we're talking about, you know, with the coronavirus, make sure you're cleaning the equipment with antibacterial wipes before and after, before you leave the office, and then when you do unpack it and bring it back home. And then from a cybersecurity piece, going back to the identify piece, that last bullet point is certainly something to be aware of, and that is understand what's behind you. What's your camera looking at when you're sitting there? Do you have your whole client list sitting behind you on every single one of your conference calls and webinars? Do you have private information, whether it's private information to your person or to your business that's behind your screen? So you wanna be aware of those things. So now, how do you create a secure home office environment? You have to think about things like that you never thought of before. And why? It was because the firm thought of it or your company thought of it. Now you have to think about it. How are you securing your network? People are like, what do you mean my network? I'm at home. I have the internet that comes into this little black box, and then I just connect to it. Well, that is your network. You've got to figure out a way to make sure that that is a secured network. Secure all computers. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you're using your personal computer or even a company computer for that matter, you know, are things, and we'll talk about some of these in more detail as we go along the way, you know, are these things secured from an antivirus perspective? Have you updated everything with regards to Windows patches and operating systems and things like that? And are you keeping them that way? Create strong passwords. We're going to talk about that. Is your Wi-Fi system in your home, do you have a password for it? And when was the last time you changed it? If you haven't changed it in years, because that's the last time you changed your internet provider, probably a good time to change that password. Are you using multi-factor authentication? What is multi-factor authentication? Be skeptical about emails and phone calls and things like that that you're getting. And then be sure to check your backup solution that you have. And we'll talk more about each one of these individually. So first, let's talk about the Wi-Fi connection. You know, a lot of people, and once again, this is a little bit different, because whether you have your personal computer that now you're using for business or your business computer that now you're using at home, a lot of times you never really even thought of the Wi-Fi connection. You just walked into a given area, it connected to the Wi-Fi, you started working. Well, now's a good time to understand, you know, what Wi-Fi connection are you connected to? And is it the most secure one? Even if you're working from home and you have your nearest neighbor is 20 miles away, it's still a good idea and a highly recommended practice to password protect your Wi-Fi and only connect your machines to a password protected Wi-Fi while you're at home. So it's always a good idea to check all these, forget any networks that were maybe Panera Breads and other things. Shouldn't have been connecting to those in the first place, but that's a story for another conversation on another day. You know, we never want to connect to those unprotected Wi-Fi connections. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, and I say, you know, when was the last time you changed your Wi-Fi password at your home? And you know, it's a blank stare. Never. They've never changed it. Now's a good time to do it, as we're all in a remote environment. So, and then not only, so now let's talk a little bit about passwords. So now you've got passwords on your Wi-Fi connection, but now you've also got to make sure, you know, are your different platforms that you're working on, whether they're software-based, cloud-based, portals into the web, are your passwords good? Have you changed them recently? I don't know, hopefully your firm or your business has a policy where every 30 to 60 days, those passwords must be refreshed and must be renewed. But it is it's recommended that you do not allow your browser to save those passwords, and you don't autofill. Those. Also, not recommended. You know, a lot of people are like, "Holy cow! How am I going to keep track of all these passwords? I've got so many passwords in my portfolio, so many different portals, and this one, and everybody's always asking for a new. How do I keep track of? I'm going to create an Excel spreadsheet." And then they title that spreadsheet passwords. Not a good idea. Not a secured way of doing things. You know, when you talk about security, you probably hear the word these days of encryption. There's two pieces to encryption. There's when you encrypt your data, that secures it, but you can't encrypt it. You can encrypt it in its static state on your system. And also you need to worry about encrypting your data as you transport it from one system to the next. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt with a question that I personally have, because I'm very guilty of, and I know I'm not the only one, of autofilling, right?
Yes.
I don't want to type it, because you know, for me, I understand the need to have a strong password. So there's, you know, 15, 20 characters there with uppercase numbers and asterisks and all that, which I don't want to have to type in all the time. So is there some app or is there something that I can use to replace the autofill function, or is my only other option to type in 16 to 20 characters every time I go into Facebook or whatever?
Yeah, no, good question. And that's actually that very last bullet, which is the right password manager is a preferred way of doing things. So there are, you know, I listed a couple. I'm not here to, you know, recommend one over the other. There are certain ones that are better than others. Certainly talk to your IT professional that you work with to kind of get the pros and cons of each one. But yeah, utilizing those password managers is the best way to do it. Then what can happen is once you're utilizing those password managers, then that's the best way to fill those passwords on portals and things like that.
So is the password manager something that I can copy paste complicated passwords from?
Yeah, depending on the password manager, they have different ways upon which it will fill those for you. It's not quite an autofill, but depending on which one you use, they have different mechanisms upon way. But that way you don't have to remember all 40 passwords that you have going into each one of your portals.
I guess the point is, it's not just a password manager on my phone. They also have them for computers, you're saying?
Absolutely. And and the ones that we're talking about here are across platforms.
Great.
So it's for phone, you know, all the way across tablets as well as laptops and computers.
That answers the question. Thank you.
Any questions come in by chance, Alex?
Just that one from me.
Okay. So let's take a step back and understand, unfortunately we are in a situation where within, 42, 48, 72 hours, we were told everybody go work from home. And not every firm, not every company had the ability to buy an asset for their employees that then needed to go remote. So unfortunately, we're in a situation where some people are needing to use their personal computers. In those particular cases, you do need to take some extra precautions. Certainly never recommended to share that system. You might have to share it with kids and spouses and other family members. If you have to do that, it's a really good idea. And now you're using it for business. It's a really good idea to start locking down, if you haven't already, lock down some of those channels where the kids can go into, and certainly create your own profile on the computer that's separate, that's for your business. And while that's certainly not foolproof, that's just another layer and does help with a little bit of protection on a personal computer basis. So that's just some high-level stuff on a home business, and how we can do things at our house. Let's talk a little bit about what are we talking about from a threat vector perspective, and what do we need to protect ourselves from, and how can they get in? So, we've all heard the word ransomware. Alex, you mentioned it earlier. Phishing attempts that are happening through the web. They're becoming more and more sophisticated, finding out more and more information from social networking and other places, creating emails, gathering information that way, and then able to exploit the business. And that's how we create ransomware a lot of times. Compromised credentials. If some of your information gets out there, those credentials can lead to the hackers penetrating your portals and other things. Poor encryption, that's one in the middle there. That's a really important one, especially for people like financial planners, lawyers, people that are emailing important documents back and forth. Email obviously is not going away. It's an important communication tool. But when you take a look at it, this kind of gets to the encryption piece I was talking about earlier. You might have a very secured computer system. You might be sitting behind firewalls and be in a very secure physical environment. That creates a secured environment for the static data that's sitting on your computer. But now you've got to take that data and you've got to get it over to your client. You've got to get that over to another law firm or somewhere else. Now you need to transport that. You need to make sure that you transport that in an encrypted manner as well. There's ways you can do that. There are encrypted email platforms. There are secured platforms for sharing files. And that's the way, CPA firms need to handle clients and information. So especially now, I guess it was tax season. Things have kind of gotten delayed a little bit on that. But now, those are portals, and those are important ways upon which we're taking data that should be encrypted and typically is encrypted in its static state, and creating a pathway for encryption as it travels from one system to the next. So over here next to poor encryption, you can also see unpatched systems are also vulnerability paths. Recently, earlier this year, a lot of people had to go buy new computers. And why? And it was because Windows 7 was going obsolete and Windows 10 was taking its place. Windows 7 was no longer going to be patched. So that creates a vulnerability path for ransom attacks, malware, and malicious behavior. So that's why everybody was scrambling to get rid of their old Windows 7 machines and get Windows 10. So when you talk about patches, these are things that do two things. There's operational patches and there's also security patches. Both come to your system, but and you can kind of say they come on quote unquote automatically, but there is a difference between getting to your machine and then actually being installed on your machine. So we make sure that our clients have patched systems, and we're trying to secure their systems as much as possible. Ransomware. Once again, Alex, you teed us up on this one, but you know, this is a whole process that you saw unfold in front of your eyes, where they take control of your system, they encrypt the data. The data is now under lock and key that they control, and until you pay them with those Bitcoins, you're not getting them back. Now, depending on the type of company you are, what kind of information you have, law firms are obviously information that you certainly don't want to get out to the public, because it's your client's information typically there. You know, if you've got, say, a manufacturer and, you know, they might release your drawings or something like that, it might be a slightly different scenario. But here we're always talking about making sure you've got a solid backup, and that's the very last bullet point. Secure your backups. That is the way that a lot of people are thwarting and getting and defeating ransomware. But you've got to make sure it's secure. You've got to make sure it's properly set up by your IT provider, so that you don't have issues even with the backups when those do occur. In today's environment, we have increased use of video conferencing. We're using it right now. You're going to continue to use it. You know, Alex, you and I were talking earlier, right? I mean, it's just so easy to just send out video links and let's just create meeting after meeting, and I can go through so many meetings in a day. Well, unfortunately now, you've got issues where people are, there's actually a term now called Zoom bombed, and they're actually coming into your Zoom meeting, gathering information about you, your company, things, and just learning things that they shouldn't be learning and shouldn't be a part of. So, you know, you want to make sure you avoid those. One of the things is, you know, there's lots of different ways you can make sure that you as the person that's sponsoring the Zoom meeting, you control who comes in, and only those that come in pass through your gate. Once the meeting has started, if everybody is there, you can then lock the meeting. All these sorts of things you should be aware of as you continue to get more and more. And then once again, we talked about it early on, be careful of what's behind you. Make sure you don't have client data and things like that as you do video conferencing. Any questions, Alex, that's come through?
Nope.
Okay, keep moving then. Try to stay on schedule here. So all this kind of wraps up into this place called the dark web, and you've probably heard things like, you know, what is this dark web? Well, if you actually take a look at it, only about 4% of the web, you and I as web users only really know about 4%, 4 or 5% of what's actually out there on the web. The rest of it is below the surface in this thing called the dark web. So that's where all of this information is being exchanged. Credentials are being bought and sold and things like that. As a side note, CMIT, we have the ability to run a dark web scan on domains. At the end of this presentation, if anybody would like us to run a dark web scan on your domain to see if anything has been compromised on your domain, just reach out to me. I'll have my contact information on on one of the last slides, and you can just reach out to me, and I'd be happy to run a complimentary dark web scan and let you know what's going on with your compromise report. So now let's talk about some security layers. Once again, going all the way back to the beginning when we talked about the NIST framework, and we talked about identifying the vectors and the risk profiles that you might have, whether you're sitting in an office or you're in a remote environment. Now we kind of talk about that protection and response piece. How are we going to defend against all these different threat vectors that we see at our clients' environments? Once again, we talk about the Windows update. Everybody had to move from Windows 10 to Windows 7 because Windows 7 will no longer be updated from a security or operational perspective. So you want to make sure your systems are properly updated. You want to make sure that you have antivirus and that antivirus is updated. If you're not familiar with it, there's what's called DNS filtering, which is web filtering. It's kind of filtering your web content. A lot of times it helps with our clients where the pop-up windows that appear, that cuts that traffic down dramatically, because a lot of those pop-up windows are semi-malicious in content, even though you're on a reputable website. So website filtering and DNS filtering is there. People that make sure that anytime you're filling out information with credentials and credit card information or anything like that, where you want to make sure that you see the S at the end of HTTP. You want to hover above the website and make sure that you're secure. Use of VPN, as we had mentioned down in the bottom corner, is appropriate. You have to understand when and where a VPN is appropriate. You're certainly not going to take a machine that is, let's call it a dirty machine, a home machine that doesn't have proper antivirus, doesn't have proper security on it, and VPN right into your server. You're going to basically create a vulnerability path by creating a secure tunnel right into your server. So there's a time and a place to use a VPN. Everybody just needs to understand that. Once again, reach out to your IT provider to make sure you understand when's the right time to use your VPN, how do you use it, and where do you use it. Be careful what you click on. You want to be careful with emails and anything that might come through on emails. And a simple thing in a home environment that people seem to overlook, even though you're home with your kids or your dog and cat, whatever, lock your computer. Hit the Windows key and L, it locks your computer. Just get in a good habit of doing that. And then additional, yeah.
Quick, so I do have a question from an attendee, but I have a question also about the last slide. And although this may be on the next one, I'm not sure. So if it is, just kick me. But I know that I personally have employees and attorneys at my firm, and I know other firms have had this happen too, where someone will get an email ostensibly from the CEO or from someone, a senior person there, and it'll say, that the email is coming from Alex Gertsburg, and the email will say, hey, I've got an urgent request. Are you at the office? Right? And it'll be like at 8:30 in the morning or something like that. And if he or she hovers over the email, they'll see that it's not actually coming from me. It's coming from how often are you seeing that happen? And is that the best way to combat something like that?
You see it more and more, and you're absolutely right. And to those of you out there on the webinar, Alex and I did not practice this dance at all, but yes, it's the very first bullet on the next slide. So they're getting better and better, them being, the bad guys, the hackers, in terms of how do you disguise things. So look, everybody's in today's world, everybody seems to be in a rush, and everyone's trying to be as productive as they can and get as much done. So you just quickly see an email come in, and especially today when you're on your devices where the screen's much smaller, you just see, oh, it's from Alex Gertsburg. Okay, yep, I know Alex, and what's he asking for, and that sort of thing. You have to really understand and get more in the habit of taking a look and seeing, is that email actually from Alex Gertsburg email, or does it just say the name Alex Gertsburg and then it's from, $! TTN46 at, whatever.com. And then, you have to say, okay, obviously a malicious email. And then things are getting even better than that in terms of they're looking really close. It could be your email address, but maybe it's off by one letter, or maybe one letter is a number versus a letter that looks very close to it. They're getting better and better and more sophisticated with how they come in. So you do have to be very cautious. We put on security awareness training for our clients that include both classroom training as well as email spoofing, just so that we can help to train clients on this very practice. It is very real. So good question, Alex. Was there another one?
There is, but So, okay, well, you may be coming back to this slide then. So the question from the audience is, it says Zoom, but I think they might have meant Zoom.
Okay.
Zoom asked for permissions, including viewing and changing our calendars when adding this meeting to Google Calendars. Was that okay?
Yeah, so that's a tough one to really answer without kind of seeing kind of exactly how the pop-up looked and whatever. In generality, that could be okay. Yes, because one of the things that, especially, I'm not sure if that person was the lead on the Zoom meeting or just somebody that was registering for the Zoom meeting. But yes, if you want Zoom to go in and actually put that on your calendar, then it's going to ask you for permission to be able to do that. So that can be okay. So once again, I would really have to see the pop-up window that does appear. In a general form, that could be okay.
Well, I guess if I can just put a finer point on that, have you seen anything where by giving Zoom permission to do that so that it does automatically populate your Outlook or Google Calendar, where that has created vulnerabilities?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not through Zoom. Now, let's put it this way, not through Zoom. But once again, Zoom is, now, especially since Zoom is taking off, now, there could be a risk of that being as we were talking about with the Zoom bomb, where now people are trying to become more sophisticated in mimicking Zoom. And then that's where the vulnerability lies.
Got it. Thank you.
So this slide just, kind of right in parallel with what you were talking about, Alex, goes right into some of the things to look at. And now I'm not sure if you even know, but there's this thing called vishing, which is voicemail hacking. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. So just be aware of these things. One of the other things that is something to look at is the signature blocks. I mean, if you're getting an email all the time from Alex, what Alex's signature block looks like. If all of a sudden this looks like a weird signature block, probably a good sign that this wasn't the Alex that sent this email. Do this thing called pick up the phone and give Alex a call. It's always a thing. And then certainly use multi-factor authentication whenever possible. You can create the strongest passwords you want with as many different characters and change it as often as you want. But there's ways you can break through those, and there's forced ways you can get through those. Multi-factor authentication is really something that you should put in every single one of your platforms that you possibly can, both business-wise as well as personal. If you're doing personal banking or you're doing online banking, go through your profile and see where it says where you can activate multi-factor authentication and do that.
Hey, Ed. We've got another question. What about sites that say they need you to accept their cookie policy to operate?
Yeah, that's certainly on a site-by-site basis. I personally try to avoid those cookies as much as possible, and unless I absolutely know with 100% certainty that is a legitimate site, that my employer has used that site, that my employees have, that everything about that site is legitimate, you're probably okay. If you can get by that site though by simply Xing out without accepting the cookies, I do that as much as I can. But if you're on a legitimate site, it's part of today's business, and I don't think you need to worry too much about it.
Great.
So then last but not least is, backups. Backup. I mean, I have it out here so many times. That is your safety net. That is, we always talk about with our clients, you can kind of look at it as your high wire act. Business and protecting your information and your client's information, it's kind of a high wire act. That's the safety net that's going to catch you. If it is done properly, meaning it's a regular backup, it's a remote backup, there's redundancy to the backup, it's being monitored, and it's set up in a secured fashion. So check with your IT provider to make sure that all of those things are part of your backup. I mean, you might even have a few of those and you might think you're good. Let me give you an example. I set up one of my clients. We went in and they said, yep, we've got backup. We've been using, I'm not going to say where, XYZ for the last, 2 years. So our backups have been automatic and our backups have been good. But if you've got a system that's comparable in price, we'll make the switch. So we made the switch. We're now managing the backups. When we went to go manage the backups, we found out that the link actually between their system and the backups that they had been doing for the last 6 months had been broken. So even though they thought they were backing their systems up, for the last 6 months, they had not. So while it was technically automatic, it wasn't managed. And because it wasn't managed, nobody saw that they were missing backups. So it's all important. The other thing to keep in mind, and that's why we have the little screen down at the bottom, and especially in today's environment when everybody's going remote, it's always a good idea to understand and take a look and make sure, especially if you're on a different system or things are slightly different than they were just a week ago, where are those systems being saved? When you hit save, make sure it's pointing to the place you want it to point to. Do you want it to point to documents? And where in documents do you want it to point to? Or are you like several of our clients where they put everything up in OneDrive or up in some shared folder up in the cloud and things like that? And somehow or another in the change, everything defaulted back to my documents versus the OneDrive. Keep an eye on that and make sure that you're pointing when you're saving your documents, you're pointing it to where you want it to be pointed. Because if you've got a business that then is practicing true backup and monitoring that, it's only backing up the places it should be where all the documents are pointing anyway. So you might be missing the boat there. So that's why we wanted to point that out. So kind of putting all this together, cybersecurity awareness over the next couple of slides, it really boils down to a layered approach. And what we're here to talk about today is how that technology piece across the top changes slightly when you go from an office environment to a home environment. And you just need to understand where those changes are for you, your firm, your client, your company, and your environment, and then adapt accordingly. Set all the right policies and procedures in place. We're here today, and hopefully you're sitting here talking and listening to us today because you want that knowledge piece. As we talked about earlier, I mean, over 80% of issues that occur are due to human error. So we really need to educate our clients and make sure that even though we put in all the right technology policies and all the right technology and all the right policies and procedures, a slip of the click and a lot of those go away. And we have to then, scramble like that guy did that left the boardroom the other day with you, Alex. So, and even more, you'll see more and more. I know we're not here. We're here with a bunch of law firms, not insurance industry, but cybersecurity insurance is almost becoming a must in today's environment. So make sure that if you haven't yet, you should be talking to your insurance agent, setting up the right insurance policy from a cyber policy perspective. And that all, is a case-by-case basis with regards to that. So that's all I have for everybody today. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity. If we can be of any assistance, it's a chaotic time. It's an unprecedented time. We're really, supporting as many. We just were on a remote session. We can do a lot remotely. One of our clients could not have their accountant come into their office because of what's going on. So they needed to change everything around and create some remote sessions and things like that. We're working with clients all the time to be able to adapt in today's environment, as unprecedented and crazy as it is. So anything we can do to help, let us know. Other than that, Alex, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions that you might have out there.
So the one that just came up must have been reading my mind because that's the same one. How can the attendees get the slides to this presentation?
Yep, we'll be working with the CMBA, and they can reach out to the CMBA and get a copy of these after the presentation, or feel free to contact me directly. And,
I'm guessing that the CMBA will send them out. If you don't get them within the next 24 hours, reach out to either Ed or me, and then we'll bug them to do that.
Mhm.
Another question, though, that I had, I don't know if anyone else did, but going back to that multi-factor authentication.
Mhm.
So I have it set up with my bank.
Mhm.
And I also have it set up on my Office 365. However, much to, I'm sure, my IT guys' disappointment, I also then check off the box that says stay signed in for 60 days, probably defeating the whole purpose. But
Not necessarily. On certain platforms, no. Certainly in Office 365, I mean, you're not going to be wanting every single time you log into your email, every time you get onto your computer, every time you get on to your smartphone, you're not going to want to be plugging in your email address and your MFA code every single time. But it should be prompting you on a regular basis. So I think I have mine set for every 2 weeks, something like that. You do want a regular basis. I would say 60 days is probably a little extreme. But yes, continue to prompt. And then that brings up another good point, and that is Office 365 and your email platform is certainly a great place where you should start to have multi-factor authentication. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it can be done in a couple of different ways, but you can either download something onto your smartphone like a Google Authenticator, which is nothing more than a number randomizer, very similar to what you used to get at the bank when they gave out those key fobs that you'd hit the button and it would give you a random code and you'd plug that into the bank. It's a very similar thing. Google Authenticator is just one of them. You can use a couple others, and those are apps that you can put on your smartphone, and it would link then to whatever portal, whether it's Office 365, whether it's your bank, whether it's whatever, by taking a screenshot of those, one of those square scan barcodes, and it'll take a picture of that and it'll link the two. You can do it that way. Multi-factor authentication can also come in the way of every time you log into somewhere, it will send an email or a text to you with a 5-digit, 6-digit code that then you would plug into that site. It's just another way for if someone were to force replicate your password and beat the password system, so to speak, that it still has to get by this. And the only way it's going to get by this is by creating whatever 5-6-digit code happens to get sent to whatever phone is attached to that. So getting through that is, and one other thing before I did see another question come up, it just reminded me, and I have no idea why this popped up. One thing I do want to also mention, especially in today's environment, going back several slides now, getting away from MFA, but if anybody does have questions on MFA, I'd be happy to answer more of them. But one thing, if you do feel like you have made an oops and you have clicked on something and you're sitting there in your home environment, the best thing, or in your work environment, wherever you're at, the first thing you should do, don't touch anything. If some window pops up or whatever, don't touch anything, don't X out of anything. Take your system off of the internet. If you're on Wi-Fi, disconnect it from Wi-Fi. If you're plugged in, disconnect the cord and make sure that the Wi-Fi is off so that then it doesn't flip on to Wi-Fi once you disconnect the cord. Now you've got an isolated issue on your particular machine, and maybe that's not great for you or your machine, but at least you're going to stop any effect throughout whatever network you happen to be on, whether it's your firm's or anybody else's. So I wanted to mention that as a piece of today's information.
That's a really great point. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, but that makes perfect sense. Question from the audience: how secure is using Gmail for solo practitioners?
What I would say is there are two different ways to look at that. The free Gmail and the G Suite, the paid system. So I'm not sure which one you're talking about. The paid G Suite is, while it's not ideal, I'll call it fine. There's, the G Suite, the paid G Suite, Office 365, very similar platforms and things like that. Free system, can it be fine? Maybe I won't. I'm not going to say it's a great way to protect. I mean, once again, it's free. So one thing you have to ask yourself is, whose information is it then? If it's a free service, all those emails, are those your emails? Whose emails are those? Where does that information go? So I'm not a fan of the free, but the G Suite is perfectly fine that you pay for.
The conventional wisdom, at least that I've heard, is that iPhones have built-in encryption and that you don't need any additional VPNs or any additional encryption. It is automatically the safest thing that you can use out there. So you could just send emails through your iPhone without needing any additional security. Although I did hear also that does not apply once you're using a public Wi-Fi. Can you speak to both of those issues? First, the assumption that so long as you're not on public Wi-Fi, that it's automatically secured and encrypted, and then secondly, whether that's still true if you're on public Wi-Fi.
Well, what you're talking about there are going through, you gotta go through the whole path. Put yourself in that email, in that packet, in that document that is leaving your phone or device and then going to a new device. Where is it going? So is it encrypted on the iPhone, or is it encrypted on your computer that is encrypted? The answer there is yes. Now, you send that email out via a cell connection. Cellular connections by default are encrypted. You're fine. However, what email path are you going through in order? You still have to go through some sort of an exchange. What email platform are you using? So you're going through some sort of an exchange, and that path is typically not encrypted. Whatever email system that you're on, you have to go through its exchange, and that is not encrypted. So unless you actually have an email platform, like as an example, we have an email platform. Whenever I need to send encrypted information, critical information, I can't encrypt those individual emails. And now think about it as I've taken that package and I've wrapped it up in aluminum foil, and now I'm sending it all the way across. And so anything trying to get into that, it's now shielded from that because it's encrypted. So I would say the answer is you're probably not, and you're certainly not encrypted all the way through from start to finish, unless you're sending through an encrypted email platform.
In other words, if somebody wants to hack into that document or whatever, they don't need to hack into your phone. They can just hack into the computer set or the email platform that originated the document or email, or the one that terminated it, right?
The path, somewhere in the path.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the related question too is, and this may have been in your slides, but I'm not sure. Which encryption software do you like the best?
There's a ton. There's a ton out there. Certainly, I'm not a big fan of. We use a lot. We use several. And if you're talking about email platforms, there are some good ones out there. We use one through our system. In terms of recommending one over the other, I don't like to get involved with that, certainly, because I don't want one platform to think I'm not. I don't like theirs over the other. There are certainly ways to encrypt both the device and the path and the email path, and it's not a one size fits all. So I would say there, just talk to your IT provider. There are a couple of good ones, and once again, you do need to protect both. If you're sending that, you want to protect your your system as well as your email path if you need to.
Gotcha. I've got one last question for you. So those of us that have an IT person and we have a VPN set up already through our computers, I know that the iPhone also has a VPN feature in it, but should I be using that feature? Should I be using some other VPN app or software with my phone if I have one on my computer at the office? How does that typically work?
Yeah, good question. And those are, you really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and understand what's going on. And the best way for me to answer that is to give you some different scenarios of clients that we have.
Right.
So there's certain clients where we're protecting their company-owned assets, their laptops. And we know that that laptop is safe and secure because we're monitoring it 24/7. We know that it has antivirus on it. We know that the antivirus is updated. We know that it's patched properly and that all the patches are updated properly. So that is now what we'll deem to be a secure device. So now if that client now needs to access information that is back at their office on the server, absolutely. We're creating a VPN path, which is a secured portal from path, not portal, a path from computer to server, and we're absolutely making sure that they're doing that. Now, if they're on a system that isn't protected by us, is a home computer, then there is a different channel. You don't want that device going directly into your server back at your firm or back at your office, because now you've got something that isn't monitored, isn't protected, isn't necessarily 100% deemed safe and secure, and you're opening that pathway right into to your server. So there's a lot of nuances there, and it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. There's ways you want to set up VPNs. There's ways you can set up remote desktop. You got to be very careful in both, because those are really ways, I don't know, actually, if you take a look at a lot of the ransomwares that have affected last year, a lot of those were based upon unsecured remote desktop sessions that weren't set up properly and provided a unsecured path right into people's information.
That takes us to the hour. Ed, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. And folks who are still with us, thank you for listening all the way till the end. And I appreciate it very much. Ed's slide is up with his contact info. Definitely call him. He's a wizard at this stuff. And thanks to the CMBA for hosting. We will see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody, and stay safe out there.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Alex.
Sure. Thank you.